Why was everyone ignoring her at the briefing table? No, that wasn't quite right. It wasn't a briefing table anymore. It was a bar, low-lit and full of noise, the kind that masks the sound of a breaking heart. Glass shattered against the hardwood, a sharp crack that cut through the laughter and music. Conversations paused just long enough to turn, stare, and dismiss. Vera Mitchell knelt to gather the shards before the liquor could stain the floorboards. Her fingers shook, or they looked like they did. To most, she was a slip of a woman in a black server's shirt, dark hair pulled tight at the nape, eyes downcast like someone accustomed to apologies. "I'm sorry," she whispered, reaching for a fragment that caught the light. "I'll clean it right away." Laughter rolled across the table, the kind of laughter that had weight behind it. "Hey, Lance Corporal Dirk," someone called, a voice heavy with beer and ego. "You think she's special, spilling drinks on a Marine's uniform?" Dirk rose from his stool, boots scuffing the floor, veins swelling beneath a loosened collar. He had the posture of someone who'd been saluted more than once and wanted to keep it that way. His hand caught the back of Vera's shirt, yanking her upright with casual cruelty. "Sorry," he repeated. "You think sorry cuts it?" No one moved. Cameras tilted in hands, screens recording. The world loved a spectacle, especially one where the villain wore the flag on his shoulder. Vera's voice stayed soft. "I didn't mean to." "Respect," he barked. "That's what you owe." His free hand rose. And for a heartbeat, everything froze. Not the stillness of shock, but the pause before a storm. The bar's old security camera panned lazily across the scene. Behind the counter, Jake, the bartender with the easy smile, glanced toward the hidden monitor, his jaw tightening. He saw what others didn't: the way her knees bent, the precise distance she kept from the man's center of gravity, the flicker of calculation behind her lowered lashes. Elena, another waitress, stepped forward, voice trembling. "Derek, she's new, just let it go." He shoved her aside. "Back off, your turn's next." No one noticed the colonel in the corner, nursing his drink like it was routine. His gaze never left the woman on the floor. 20 years in uniform had taught him to recognize the moments before things went bad. Vera's eyes moved once, 3 doors, 2 windows, 1 emergency exit. Her mind mapped every distance, every line of sight, every possible cover. It wasn't habit, it was survival. And still she played her part, shoulders rounded, lips pressed tight, fingers trembling as she picked up each glass shard. The act was so perfect it almost fooled her too. Almost. A memory slid through her thoughts like a knife. Rain hammering steel, the stench of mud and cordite, a friend's voice cut short mid-breath. She blinked it away. This was Kandahar. This was just a bar. "Yo, Derek," one of his buddies called, accent too thick to hide the foreign edges. "Girl like that shouldn't even work here." Vera rose, knees flexing, hand brushing her hip, the precise place a holster used to rest. The motion was instinctive, too natural. "Hey," another Marine, Thompson, tipped his beer, letting it pour deliberately onto the clean floor. The amber river spread toward Vera's feet. "Missed a spot." She dropped to her knees again, blotting the spill with practiced motions. To anyone watching, she looked scared, humiliated. But her posture was wrong for submission, weight balanced forward, hands placed for leverage, breathing slow and measured. Combat breathing. Marcus, the bouncer, half rose from his chair, but Jake caught his eye and gave a tiny shake of the head. "Not yet." Vera stood, smoothing her shirt, ensuring the fabric lay flat. "I didn't say you could stand," Derek muttered. His hand clamped around her wrist. His confidence faltered for the briefest instant. Under his fingers wasn't softness, it was tension. Muscle, strength coiled like steel wire. Something in his gut whispered danger, but pride drowned it out. Rodriguez, the one with the phone, laughed. "This'll go viral, drunk Marine teaches waitress manners." His tone was all mockery, but his eyes were sharp, too sharp. A young couple near the door moved to leave. Another Marine, Wilson, stepped in their way. "Show just getting started." Derek's men spread without orders. One near the kitchen, another by the front, one floating between tables. It looked casual. It was. They were taking control of the room. Vera checked her watch. 17 minutes. Her lips moved silently, counting. Thompson's gaze caught on the faint scar running along her forearm. Clean, surgical, too neat to be an accident. Rodriguez pointed. Look, tattoo. The edge of ink peeked where her shirt had ridden up, a sliver of black against skin. Probably a butterfly, he sneered. Vera pulled the fabric down, but her breathing changed. In 4, hold 4, out 4, calm, ready. At table 7 an old man stood. Gray hair, faded jacket, eyes that had seen too many battles. Leave the girl alone, he said quietly. Wilson shoved him back down. Sit, old man, not your war. Something flickered in Vera's expression, just a flash of something sharp, cold, predatory. Then it vanished. Jake's hand slipped beneath the counter, pressing a hidden switch. The faintest hum answered somewhere in the walls. Derek's voice cut through the tension again. What's that? He noticed the photograph that had slipped from Vera's apron pocket, a little girl in a wheelchair, smiling at the camera. He crushed it under his boot. Your kid, where's Daddy? Probably ran when he saw what a pathetic. He never finished. Vera went still, entirely terrifyingly still. It wasn't fear, it was control. The kind of stillness that precedes violence, the moment a sniper's finger rests on the trigger or a soldier hears the safety click off. The air shifted. Everyone felt it, the primal recognition of a predator revealed. Her voice, when it came, was quiet. You shouldn't have done that. Jake's phone buzzed once, a coded message. 2 words, code red, now. The colonel set down his glass and stood, every movement precise, deliberate. Rodriguez stepped in his path. Bars closed, old man. I don't think so, the colonel replied. His tone carried authority, the kind that belonged to someone used to being obeyed. Wilson's hand drifted to his waistband. The lights flickered twice, then steadied. Somewhere magnetic locks engaged with soft clicks. The sound was faint, like rounds chambering. What had been a bar full of laughter had become a sealed trap. Vera's countdown reached 7 minutes. Derek circled her, grin spreading. All right, enough games, everyone on the ground. His men moved as one, weapons appearing with lethal familiarity, not the clumsy draw of drunks, professionals. Screams, chairs scraped, people dropped, hands over their heads. Everyone except Vera. She stayed upright, expression neutral, eyes half-lidded like someone listening to an old song. Derek aimed at her chest. Something's off about you. She raised her hand slowly. I'm just a waitress, please. As she lifted her arms, her shirt rode up again, revealing the bottom of that ink design. Not a butterfly, not a symbol stolen from a catalog. An eagle's wing, black, intricate, professional. Thompson's eyes widened. Derek, check her back. Turn around, Derek ordered. Her hands trembled as she obeyed, twisting slowly. The movement was measured, every inch of it preparing for something unseen. Take it off, he snapped. She hesitated, voice shaking. Please, no. He lost patience, grabbed her collar and tore it open. The rip of fabric echoed like a gunshot. Silence followed. Then the whispers began. Because on her back wasn't a butterfly at all. It was the eagle, globe, and anchor, the emblem of the United States Marine Corps. Beneath it, a skull impaled by a dagger, force reconnaissance. And under that, words that froze even the colonel mid-stride. Ghost 7, Kandahar 2019. Someone gasped. Holy hell, the old man whispered. She's real. Derek's face drained of color. No, you're dead. We killed you. Vera turned, eyes hard as obsidian. The meekness was gone. Her voice was low, controlled, lethal. Your intel was wrong, Vyulev. The name hit him like a bullet. His American drawl vanished. replaced by the guttural consonants of Eastern Europe. "How do you? Rodriguez," she continued, "you still favor your left knee. IAD Mosul 2017. They couldn't remove the fragment. You limp when you think no one's looking." Rodriguez stumbled backward, dropping his phone. The live stream continued, the camera capturing his fear. "Thompson," her eyes flicked his way. "Scar on your neck 3 inches left to right, my knife. You tried to execute a family in Coast. I disagreed." His hand went to the mark instinctively. "Wilson," she didn't even glance. "Still wake up smelling burning flesh. White phosphorus leaves a stain deeper than skin." And finally she faced Derek again. Alexei Vyulov, commander of Scorpion Cell, arms dealer, war criminal, the man who sold defective body armor to Marines, 23 dead because you wanted 5% more profit. The words landed like artillery. The colonel stepped closer. "Major Mitchell, stand down, that's an order." Vera didn't look at him. "Not your jurisdiction anymore, Harrison. I haven't been military for 18 months. Jake straightened behind the bar, revealing a badge instead of a weapon. U.S. Marshal Service. Everyone stay calm. Marcus touched a finger to his earpiece. "Overwatch to all units. Tango confirmed. Ghost 7 has ID on Vyulov." Doors burst open. The sound of boots, commands shouted with precision. Operators in black armor flooded the room, force recon, every one of them. "Welcome to Firebase Bunker, Vyulov," Vera said. "You didn't walk into a bar, you walked into a cage." Vyulov's weapon wavered. "You set us up. 3 years ago, you killed my sister's unit with your defective armor. 18 months ago, I went dark to find you. 6 months ago, we chose this place for the trap." Her gaze swept the room. Every single person in here was vetted. Every table, every booth, every barstool filled with someone who knew exactly what might happen tonight. The tactical team sealed the exits. "You sold more than armor," she said softly. "You sold out your own." Volkov snarled. "You can't win, there are more of us." Berlin's cell was raided yesterday. Moscow folded 2 hours ago. Caracas, she tilted her head. They owed me a favor. He reached for leverage, grabbing an old woman by the shoulder. "Back off or she dies." The woman pivoted sharply, heel into his instep, elbow into his gut. He collapsed, shocked. "Army nurse," she said calmly. "Vietnam 3 tour." A tranquilizer dart struck Vyulov's neck before he could recover. He hit the floor like a felled tree. The room erupted into motion. Operators cuffing, medics tending, agents sweeping. Through it all, Vera stood motionless, shirt torn, scars visible like a map of survival. Colonel Harrison approached. "Major Mitchell, it's over." "No," she murmured, eyes on the unconscious man at her feet. "It's just beginning." How quiet could a battlefield be after the shooting stopped? You'd think silence would bring peace. But in that bunker, silence was just the sound of adrenaline fatting into disbelief. The smell of gun oil and spilled beer hung thick. Flashing blue lights strobed through broken windows as the Force Recon team moved with clinical precision, clearing corners already secured. Patrons who'd been hostages moments ago were now witnesses, their fear giving way to confusion. And at the center of it all stood Vera Mitchell. Her torn shirt clung to her shoulders, sweat and blood streaking across skin marked by scars that told a story no words could. One ran across her ribs, shrapnel, long-healed. Another sliced diagonally along her bicep, knife wound, deep, deliberate. The kind that came from close combat. The tattoo on her back, the Marine Corps emblem, the skull and dagger, wasn't just ink. It was confession and armor all at once. Jake approached first, badge still hanging from his neck. "It's done," he said, voice tight. But Vera didn't answer. She was kneeling, collecting something from the floor, torn paper, half-soaked in beer. The photograph. She pieced it together slowly, thumb pressing against the jagged rip, that ran through the image of a smiling girl in a wheelchair. The face was familiar, hauntingly so, though most in the room didn't recognize it. Lance Corporal Sarah Mitchell. Her sister, killed in Kandahar, victim of an IED that should never have penetrated her armor. Vera's jaw clenched, her voice barely above a whisper. He doesn't die easy, he doesn't get to. Marcus, the bouncer, who wasn't a bouncer, crouched beside her, his earpiece still alive with radio chatter. Ghost team reports secure perimeter. Scorpion cells down. Good, Vera said quietly. Now we make sure they stay down. Colonel Harrison stepped forward, the authority in his voice tempered by something else, respect. Major, he began, you need medical debrief. Command wants. Command wanted me dead, sir, she interrupted, still without looking at him. 18 months ago, they stamped KIA next to my name and erased the file. So, unless they suddenly changed policy. Her voice trailed off. The colonel didn't argue. He'd seen this before, soldiers too deep in the shadows to come back clean. Then at least let us finish the sweep, he said quietly. Vera finally stood. Sweep fast. Media's going to hit this place in 10 minutes. And this, she gestured to her own back, the ink, the scars, the proof, doesn't exist anymore. Across the room, Rodriguez stirred, hands zip-tied behind him. He dropped the accent now, his fear stripped him bare. You don't understand, he hissed. He wasn't the only one. You think Vyulov's the head. He's middle management. Vera walked toward him, boots crunching glass. Then tell me who's above him. He looked up, eyes darting between the Marines, the marshals, and her. You wouldn't believe me if I told you. Try me. He hesitated, not out of loyalty but terror. You start this war, you won't survive it. Vera crouched, her face inches from his. I already didn't. He flinched. Then his bravado cracked. Scorpion isn't a cell, it's a brand. There are others, spider, wolf, eagle. You kill one nest, the rest scatter, but they'll come for you, Ghost 7. They always come for ghosts. Vera's eyes didn't waver. Let them. Jake's voice cut through the tension. Transport inbound. Within moments, armored vehicles rolled up outside. Federal agents began leading the restrained men out one by one. Flashbang residue and broken glass glittered under the emergency lights. O'Brien, the old veteran who'd stood up earlier, limped toward Vera. You're her, he said softly, the Reaper of Kandahar. The nickname made the room go still. Some looked at her with awe, others with unease. I was, Vera replied. Now I'm just trying to finish what she started. Your sister. She nodded once. O'Brien reached out, his weathered hand touching her arm briefly, the kind of gesture soldiers exchanged when words failed. Semper Fi, he murmured. Vera met his gaze. Always faithful, she answered, but her eyes said something else entirely, always haunted. As the last of the Scorpion members were loaded into transports, Colonel Harrison approached again, lowering his voice. We'll need to move you immediately. There'll be questions, investigations. None of them matter, Vera said. This wasn't about them. He studied her. Then what was it about? Her answer came after a long pause. Debt. Harrison understood. The kind of debt that can't be repaid with money or medals, only with justice. The convoy pulled away, red and blue lights flashing into the wet night. Inside one of the vehicles, Vyulov lay sedated, head lolling, tranquilizer still embedded in his neck. As the doors slammed shut, Vera exhaled for the first time in hours. The stillness in her bones gave way to something else, a slow, burning exhaustion. Jake approached, wiping blood from his temple. You should sit down. I can't, she said. If I stop now, I'll feel it. He frowned. Feel what? The silence. Because silence was where the memories lived, the ones that clawed at her when the world wasn't loud enough to drown them. She turned toward the bar counter, the same one she'd wiped clean 100 times over months of pretending to be small. The irony wasn't lost on her. She'd hidden in plain sight, and the only people who had seen her clearly were the ones she'd just arrested. Marcus broke the heavy quiet. "Package secure," he reported. "Force recon transferring custody to federal transport. We're clear." Jake nodded. "Then let's get her out before press shows." They guided Vera toward the back exit, or what the rest of the world thought was one. Past a storage room down a narrow corridor, the hum of generators grew louder. Behind an unmarked steel door, a secondary command post hummed with life. Computer monitors, tactical feeds, satellite imagery. It wasn't just a bar. It had never been just a bar. This was Firebase Bunker, a forward staging point for an off-the-books federal operation designed to capture the ghosts of wars that never officially happened. And Vera Mitchell was the ghost they'd built it for. Jake handed her a headset. "They'll try to flip him," he said. "Vyulov, too valuable not to trade. He's got names, accounts, buyers." "He's got blood," Vera interrupted. "My sister, 22 others. Don't let them forget that when the politicians start making deals." "You think they will?" She didn't answer. She didn't have to. On one of the monitors, an operator scrolled through recovered files, encrypted manifests, payment trails, weapons contracts. Scorpion Cell hadn't just sold armor. They'd sold trust. And trust, once broken, bleeds slow. Jake leaned closer. "There's chatter coming from overseas. Berlin, Moscow, Caracas, all referencing the same name, Ghost 7. You made an impression." "I wasn't trying to," she said. He smirked faintly. "You never are." Another voice came through the comms. "All clear. Media's locked outside. They think it was a bar fight gone wrong." Vera gave a dry laugh. "They're not wrong." But as she moved past the monitors, something on one of the feeds caught her eye. A shadow in the alley outside, moving against the pattern of the evacuation. "Wait," she said. The operator froze the frame. The image sharpened. A figure, tall, lean, face obscured by a cap, watching the convoy leave. Not local police, not press. "Who's that?" Jake asked. Vera stepped closer. Zoom in. The screen pixelated, then cleared just enough to see a faint tattoo on the person's hand, a scorpion, curling around a globe. "Another cell," Marcus said. "No," Vera murmured. "A replacement. They already knew he'd fall." The realization hit like cold water. Tonight hadn't ended anything. It had triggered something. Jake's radio buzzed again, voice urgent. "Ghost Command, this is Delta 2. We've got movement at Checkpoint Bravo. Possible tail on the transport." Static, then silence. Vera didn't wait for orders. "Get me outside." "Vera." "Now." She moved like someone who'd done this her whole life, because she had. Out in the wet night, the air smelled of exhaust and rain. The streetlights cast long, uneven shadows across the asphalt. In the distance, the transport convoy's lights were fading down the highway. Vera scanned rooftops, alleys, reflections in puddles. Every sound mattered, every silence more so. Marcus followed, weapon drawn. "You see anything?" She shook her head slowly. "No, that's the problem." Then a sound, faint, rhythmic, wrong. A motorcycle engine revving once, then cutting off. Vera turned, instinct screaming, "Get down." The explosion tore through the night, not a massive detonation, but precise, directional. The lead transport erupted in a fireball of light and shrapnel. The blast threw her back against a wall. Ears ringing, lungs seizing, she tasted smoke and iron. Marcus dragged her behind cover, shouting words she couldn't hear. Through the haze, she saw the wreckage, twisted metal, flames licking at the rain. Vyulov's vehicle gone. Her mind locked onto one thought: not again. She forced herself up, every muscle screaming. Through the rising smoke, a figure walked into view. Not Vyulov. A woman. Blonde hair tied tight, coat too clean for the chaos around her. And tattooed on the back of her hand, the same emblem. Scorpion. The woman met Vera's eyes through the flames and mouthed a single word. Soon. Then she vanished into the dark. Sirens howled closer. The scene blurred with flashing light and shouting voices, but Vera's world had gone quiet again. She spent 3 years hunting one man. Now she realized she'd only cut off a limb. The body was still out there. And it was coming. Harrison's voice came through the radio, breaking the static. Mitchell, report. Vera stared at the wreckage, at the inferno reflecting in her eyes. Sir, she said quietly, we've just opened another front. Why was the fire so quiet? The flames licked the night, devouring steel and asphalt, yet the sound was swallowed by the rain, as if even the storm didn't want to disturb what was left. Vera stood at the edge of the blast zone, smoke curling around her silhouette. The wrecked transport still burned, its metal frame glowing orange against the black sky. The air stank of fuel, blood, and finality. She didn't blink, didn't move, didn't speak. Because she'd seen this before, in Afghanistan, in Iraq, in every place where truth went to die under classified labels. Marcus's voice came from somewhere behind her. We've got to move, Vera. There might be secondary charges. She didn't answer. Her eyes were fixed on the point where the mysterious woman had stood moments before, just beyond the flames, calm and untouched. Who the hell was that? Marcus demanded. Vera finally exhaled, the sound barely audible over the rain. Scorpion Cell doesn't recruit women, she murmured. Not the last time I checked. Then maybe they evolved. She shook her head. No, this wasn't evolution. This was replacement. That explosion wasn't an escape. It was a message. Marcus followed her gaze to the destroyed transport. A message that says what? Vera looked up, eyes reflecting the burning wreckage. That Ghost 7 isn't hunting them anymore. They're hunting me. Sirens screamed in the distance, growing louder. Blue and red lights flashed against the wet pavement as emergency vehicles closed in. Fire crews, local PD, unmarked sedans that didn't belong to either. Harrison's voice crackled through the comms again. Mitchell, do you copy? Vera tapped her earpiece. I'm here. Status. Transport gone, target terminated, casualties, she hesitated. All accounted for except one. There was a pause. You saw her too, didn't you? Vera blinked. You're saying she's known. Intel picked up chatter last week, Harrison replied grimly. A woman operating under the codename Widow. She's been linked to a dozen cleanup ops. Wherever Scorpion burns, she's there to make sure nothing survives, including witnesses. Then we're not dealing with soldiers, Vera said. We're dealing with exterminators. Marcus cursed under his breath, and we just painted a target on ourselves. Jake's voice joined the channel. Local authorities are converging. We need to clear you out before the story leaks. Vera's gaze stayed on the flames. Let it leak. Vera. Let them see what happens when corruption hides behind uniforms. Maybe someone will finally start asking the right questions. She turned away from the wreck, each step deliberate. Her right arm trembled slightly, adrenaline bleeding off, but she didn't let it show. The police perimeter was already forming. Cameras would follow next. In less than an hour, every news outlet in California would report a mysterious explosion outside a veteran's bar. But they'd never know the truth. They never did. Jake met her halfway down the block, rain plastering his hair against his forehead. I've got an extraction van 2 streets over. You're not gonna like where it's headed. Try me. He opened the door, revealing Elena, the detective who'd gone undercover as a waitress, sitting inside, pale and exhausted. Back to headquarters, Jake said. Debrief with command. Vera climbed in silently. As the van pulled away, the lights of the burning convoy receded into the rearview mirror. a funeral pyre for the illusion of safety. Elena spoke first, voice shaking slightly. That woman, she didn't run. She wanted you to see her. Vera nodded slowly. That's what scares me. For a while no one spoke. The hum of the tires, the faint static of comms, the rhythm of rain against the metal roof, they filled the silence that always followed violence. Elena finally broke it. Why keep doing this, Vera? You could have disappeared, started over, let someone else carry it. Vera's response came after a long pause, because someone always says that. Let someone else carry it. And every time it ends with another folded flag. Her voice lowered almost to a whisper. I made a promise on a battlefield. 23 bodies under tarps, all wearing armor stamped with Vyulov's company logo. My sister was one of them. I swore I'd burn every person who profited from that blood. And now that he's gone, the only way to keep that promise is to keep going. Jake glanced back from the driver's seat. And when there's no one left to burn, then I'll stop. No one challenged her. There was nothing to say. When they reached the safe house, it was nearly dawn. The kind of gray light that makes everything look like a memory. The building was old, 2 stories, nondescript. Inside, walls lined with monitors displayed satellite feeds and encrypted transmissions. Vera stood at the central console, watching as data scrolled past names, shell companies, bank accounts. Threads that connected the night's chaos to something much bigger. Marcus joined her, handing over a tablet. Recovered this before the transport went up. Partial data fragment from Vyulov's uplink. You'll want to see it. The file opened to a string of coordinates, each tagged with a timestamp and a symbol. Wolf, spider, eagle. They're active, Vera said quietly. Scorpion was just one arm. Jake leaned closer. Eagle, that's domestic, right, DC? Yeah, Marcus confirmed. And if that's true, we're not just talking foreign corruption anymore. Government, Elena asked. Vera's silence was the answer. Harrison entered the room then, trench coat dripping rain onto the floor. I just came from command, he said grimly. They're ordering a full recall. Every operative in Ghost Protocol is to report immediately. Marcus frowned. That doesn't make sense. We've still got cells to neutralize. It makes perfect sense, Vera said. Someone in DC wants us out of the field. They're not protecting us. They're protecting themselves. Harrison didn't deny it. There's talk of oversight committees, unauthorized operations. Someone leaked the existence of Ghost Protocol to the press. Jake swore. Who? Harrison's voice hardened. Doesn't matter who. What matters is they know your names, your locations. If you stay, you'll be hunted. Vera met his gaze. We already are. For a moment, no one spoke. The truth hung between them like smoke, heavy, inescapable. Finally, Harrison sighed. You've done enough, Major. Let the system handle the rest. Vera's eyes darkened. The system built this. She turned away, staring at the wall of data again. You think Vyulov acted alone, that he found buyers, smuggled tech, paid off officials without help. You think 23 Marines died because of one man's greed. She turned back toward him, voice sharp. No, Colonel, this was organized, funded, protected. Elena looked between them. Then who's pulling the strings? Vera didn't answer. She didn't have to. The name pulsing on the screen said enough. Clayborn Consulting Group. Defense contracts, intelligence analysis, private security logistics, on paper just another DC firm. But Vera knew better. She'd seen their logo once before, stamped on a crate in Kandahar, inside a forward operating base that shouldn't have had American equipment. Her hands curled into fists. Jonathan Clayborn, she whispered, former CIA deputy director, retired consulting for defense contractors. He's Eagle. Harrison's brow furrowed. You're sure? I don't get to be wrong anymore. Jake straightened. Then we go after him. No, Vera said, we don't. Marcus frowned. Then who does? She took a long breath. Me. The room fell silent. Elena's voice was soft but firm. You can't do this alone. He's protected by layers of government, private security, politicians. You go after him without backing, you'll disappear for real this time. Vera looked up, meeting her gaze. I already did. Harrison stepped forward, jaw tight. You walk out that door, you're not part of any operation, you're a rogue agent. You'll lose everything. She gave a small, sad smile. I lost everything the day they buried my sister. For a moment, no one could look her in the eye. Harrison finally spoke, quieter now. Then at least take something. He handed her a small drive. Encrypted files we couldn't crack, pulled from Vulov's servers before the blast. Maybe it helps, maybe it doesn't, but it's the only thread we've got left. Vera took it, pocketing it without a word. Then she reached for her jacket, not military, not official. Civilian black leather. Simple, functional, the kind of clothing that didn't draw attention until it needed to. As she walked toward the exit, Marcus stepped in her way. You really plan to walk into the Capitol alone? She paused, meeting his eyes. Ghosts always go alone. Jake's voice followed her to the door. You sure about this? Her answer was quiet, but it carried. I'm sure about one thing, someone in that city is cashing checks written in blood. I'm going to find out who signs them. The rain hit her face as she stepped outside, cold and steady. The world was waking up, commuters, news anchors, politicians, none of them knowing the war that had just reignited in the shadows of their own government. As she crossed the street, she pulled the drive from her pocket and turned it over in her hand. A faint inscription caught the light, engraved into the metal casing, small enough to miss unless you knew where to look. 3 words, war is business. Vera's grip tightened until her knuckles went white. And for the first time since Kandahar, she smiled, not from victory, but from understanding. The enemy wasn't across the ocean anymore. It was home. How do you fight an enemy that salutes the same flag you do? The city glittered like it was proud of its sins, marble monuments polished clean, glass towers reflecting power back at itself. Washington, D.C. didn't smell like smoke or gunpowder. It smelled like rain on asphalt and ambition. Vera Mitchell stood at the edge of the Potomac Bridge as dawn broke over the Capitol. To everyone else, she was nobody, just another commuter in a dark coat, hair tied back, face unreadable. But beneath the civilian calm, a storm was building. She fought men with rifles, with bombs, with knives. But this was different. These enemies wore smiles. They drafted contracts instead of kill lists. They called it national interest. Her phone buzzed once, a secure ping from an untraceable number. A single line of text glowed on the cracked screen. They know you're here. No name, no signature, just confirmation of what she already felt, eyes watching from rooftops, reflections in mirrored glass, cameras she could almost hear humming. Vera slipped the phone into her pocket and started walking. Each step carried her closer to the building she'd seen 100 times on news feeds, Clayborn Consulting Group. White stone, steel-framed windows, respectable, forgettable. The kind of building people walked past without ever realizing history was being rewritten inside. The security guards didn't look twice at her when she entered the lobby. They never do, not when the threat doesn't fit their expectations. She rode the elevator to the 23rd floor, the USB drive burning cold in her palm. When the doors opened, she stepped into silence. The hallway was lined with framed photos. Generals shaking hands with senators, soldiers saluting in deserts, executives posing beside contracts worth billions. At the end of the hall, a receptionist looked up. Blonde, polite, professional. Good morning, do you have an appointment? Vera smiled. It didn't reach her eyes. No, but I think Mr. Clayborn will want to see me. The woman frowned. I'm sorry, he's not. He will. The way Vera said it left no room for argument. 2 minutes later, she stood inside an office that smelled like old books and expensive whiskey. The man behind the desk could have been anyone's father: gray hair, crisp suit, warmth rehearsed to perfection. "Major Mitchell," he said without looking surprised. "Or do you still go by Ghost 7? She froze. "Don't bother denying it," Clayborn continued, pouring himself coffee. "You've been on our radar since Kandahar. I'll admit you've been inconvenient to our operations. Effective, though. Brutal. I almost respect it." Vera's voice was calm, but her pulse was. "You knew about the armor." He smiled faintly. "I approved the contracts." For a heartbeat, the world tilted. "You killed them," she said quietly. "No, Major. I funded progress. Wars need equipment, and equipment needs funding. Your sister's death was collateral in a system too large for guilt." Vera stepped closer, slow and deliberate. "You think hiding behind paperwork makes you clean?" Clayborn shrugged. "I think it makes me necessary. The country runs on people like me, men who understand that wars aren't won by honor but by balance sheets." She stared at him. "You're not a patriot, you're a parasite." He chuckled softly, sipping his coffee. "And you're a soldier who still believes in good and evil. That's why you'll lose." "Maybe," she said, "but I only have to win once." The words hung between them, heavier than any threat. Clayborn leaned back, studying her like a scientist observing a specimen. "You didn't come here to shoot me, or you'd have done it already. So what do you want?" "Names," she said. "Everyone above you, everyone funding this." He smiled again, the kind of smile that said he already owned the game. "You think I keep that on paper? We learned from Watergate, Major. Plausible deniability is the true American legacy." Vera stepped forward, sliding the USB drive onto his desk. "Then maybe this will refresh your memory." He looked down at the drive, then up at her. "You hacked Vulov's servers. Recovered fragments before your cleanup crew, blew his transport sky high." Clayborn's jaw tightened, a tell she'd been waiting for. "You don't get to hide behind your hired ghosts anymore," she said. "I'm one of them, and I stopped taking orders the day you buried me." He regarded her in silence for a long moment, then laughed quietly. "You really think truth changes anything?" Vera tilted her head. "It changes you." And before he could respond, she was gone. No gunfire, no shouting, just the whisper of the elevator closing. She didn't need to kill him, not yet. Fear would do more damage than a bullet. Outside, the sky had darkened again. The forecast said clear skies, but storms have a way of ignoring forecasts. By the time she reached the street, the USB drive had already done its work. Hidden malware, something Marcus's cyber unit had planted years ago, activated the moment Clayborn plugged it into his system. A cascade of digital fire spread through his secure network, tearing open encrypted vaults and data tunnels. In a room 12 miles away, a monitor lit up. Jake leaned forward, eyes widening. "We've got access. Holy hell, she did it." Elena stood beside him, watching as files poured in: bank transfers, coded messages, minutes from private meetings. Marcus whistled softly. "You seeing this? Pentagon memos, arms shipment logs. Half of Congress has blood money in these accounts." Jake's voice dropped. "And Clayborn, he's connected to something called the Syndicate Council." Elena scrolled further. "There's more: Spider, Wolf, Eagle. They're not just code names, they're divisions. Each one controls a region. Clayborn's DC Eagle, and Spider Hong Kong, Wolf Berlin, Scorpion, well, dead," Marcus finished, "courtesy of Ghost 7. Back in the capital, Vera walked without destination. She moved through crowds like a shadow, invisible until you looked too closely. Her reflection in a passing window startled her for a second, not because of the scars or the fatigue, but because of what was missing. She didn't look like a Marine anymore. She didn't even look like Vera Mitchell. Just a ghost wearing her skin. Her phone buzzed again, another anonymous text. Bangkok Ghost 8 compromised. Her stomach tightened. Ghost 8, Captain Maria Santos, Force Recon, declared dead 2 years ago. But Vera knew better. Death in the Ghost program was flexible, a tool, not a truth. She opened a secure app, one only Ghost operatives used. The network flickered, connections unstable. Then a single line of text appeared on screen. "Help me." Her breath caught. Maria was alive. For now. She turned on her heel and started back toward Union Station. The city was already waking, people scrolling through headlines, sipping coffee, walking past stories they'd never truly see. A new alert flashed across a nearby TV screen in the window of a cafe. Defense contractor under cyber investigation. Leaked data links government officials to foreign arms sales. Clayborn's photo filled the screen. Vera allowed herself one quiet breath of satisfaction. The truth had started leaking faster than the system could contain it. But for every corrupt man exposed, another would take his place. And somewhere, halfway around the world, one of her own was sending a distress call. She pulled her hood up, disappearing into the crowd. The voice in her head, the one that had kept her alive for years, whispered the same truth over and over again. There's no such thing as peace, just the pauses between wars. Across the city, in a boardroom lined with screens, Clayborn watched the chaos unfold on live television. He'd underestimated her. That wouldn't happen again. He picked up a phone, not a normal one, but a secure satellite model reserved for people above accountability. "She's active," he said simply. "Mitchell Ghost 7, the asset survived Kandahar." A voice answered, distorted through layers of encryption. "Then initiate protocol widow, full authorization." Clayborn hesitated. "You're sure?" "Positive," the voice replied. "She burned one of our arms, we cut off hers." The line went dead. Clayborn stared out at the skyline of Washington, powerful, pristine, and rotten to its core. The syndicate had survived wars, scandals, revolutions. It would survive this too. He poured himself another drink and whispered to the glass, "You think you understand war, Major Mitchell, but the real war isn't fought in deserts or alleys. It's fought here." He raised the glass in mock salute toward the city. "And it never ends." Back on the train platform, Vera stood in line for the Midnight Express. Her reflection shimmered in the window, a ghost between worlds, soldier and outlaw, patriot and fugitive. She looked down at her sister's photo, edges worn soft from being carried through too many missions. "Almost there, Sarah," she whispered. "Almost." The announcement came overhead. "Now boarding, international connections to Bangkok." As she stepped onto the train, a thought crossed her mind, quiet, cold, inevitable. Every ghost leaves something unfinished. And she was going to finish this. Why did Bangkok always smell like secrets? The city didn't sleep. It dreamed feverish, neon-lit dreams. Tuk-tuks weaved through traffic like insects chasing light. Monks in saffron robes walked barefoot past glass towers, and somewhere between the noise and the stillness, Vera Mitchell stepped off the train and became someone else. Jennifer Walsh, freelance photographer, that was the passport name. The camera slung over her shoulder wasn't for pictures. The lens hid encrypted drives, frequency jammers, and a microtransmitter small enough to broadcast a revolution. But none of that mattered. She was here for one reason. Maria Santos, Ghost 8. A friend, a sister in arms. And maybe the last living person who understood what it meant to be dead and still fighting. The air wrapped around her like wet cloth as she crossed the terminal. She could feel eyes everywhere, not one pair but many. Government, syndicate, locals paid to notice too much. She lived long enough in the shadows to recognize when she was walking inside a surveillance net. She didn't hurry. Ghosts never did. Outside, a black SUV idled at the curb. The driver, older, lean, the kind of man whose silence told you he once worked for a government that no longer existed, opened the door without a word. "Safe house?" Vera asked. He nodded. They drove through Bangkok's restless veins, past the night markets, the gold-spired temples, the alleys that smelled of oil and incense. Everything alive, everything watching. The safe house was 3 floors above a noodle shop. From the street, it looked like a forgotten apartment, paint peeling, windows tinted to hide the reinforced glass. Inside, Marcus was waiting, already blending into the shadows. "You took your time," he said. "Had to make sure I wasn't followed." He grinned faintly. "You were." Vera didn't ask how he knew. She just asked how close. Close enough to care, not close enough to matter. Elena appeared from the corner, exhausted but steady. Rodriguez's file was right. Maria's last transmission came from the warehouse district near the river. She's been dark for 4 days. Vera stared at the map spread across the table. 4 days is too long. "She might still be alive," Elena said, though her voice carried doubt. "She's alive," Vera said. "If she weren't, they wouldn't be this loud." Marcus glanced toward the laptop screen, where local news headlines scrolled. A fire at a storage facility. 2 missing customs officers. Unmarked shipping containers vanishing from the docks. The syndicate was here. And they were cleaning house. Vera leaned over the map. "Show me the coordinates." Marcus tapped the spot. "Here, Building 47, Chalong-2, used to be textile import. Now it's private security, supposedly. Cameras, guards, unregistered vehicles in and out all night." Vera's eyes narrowed. "Trap." "Obviously." She smiled without humor. "Then let's walk into it." The next day crawled forward heavy with heat. Vera dressed in street clothes, khaki shirt, messenger bag, sunglasses, the costume of a traveler who wanted to be invisible. She and Marcus moved separately through the market crowds. Vendors shouted in Thai, hawking noodles, fake watches, amulets for protection. She wondered briefly if any of them worked. The closer they got to the river district, the quieter it became. Tourists thinned. Locals kept their eyes down, the kind of silence that smelled of fear. "Eyes up," Marcus murmured through the calm. "2 watchers at your 9 o'clock, one pretending to sell cigarettes." "I see them," Vera replied. They didn't stop her, didn't have to. Their job was to make sure she knew she was being seen. The warehouse loomed ahead, corrugated steel, rusted signs, and a flag of some private security firm that didn't exist a year ago. Vera's pulse steadied. Combat breathing. In for 4, hold for 4, out for 4. She waited for a delivery truck to pass, then slipped inside through a side door. The air smelled of oil and something else, disinfectant. The kind hospitals use after they clean up a mess. She moved through rows of crates until she found it. A single chair, restraint still attached, blood dried dark against the floor. And in the corner, a mark scratched into the wall, a tiny folded crane. Maria's symbol. Vera knelt beside it, touching the edge. "You're still playing," she whispered. Behind her, footsteps. She spun, gun drawn. The man who stepped into the light was Syndicate. He was too composed, too quiet. "Relax," he said, showing empty hands. "You must be Mitchell." "Who's asking?" "Captain Thanum," he said in accented English. "Royal Thai Intelligence. I've been told to assist." Vera didn't lower the weapon. "Told by who?" "Your Colonel Harrison. He anticipated you'd ignore the recall order." That almost made her smile. "He knows me well." Thanum nodded toward the wall. "Your friend left more than that. We intercepted a coded transmission from her frequency 30 minutes ago." "She's alive." "Alive, yes. Free, no, she's bait." Vera's throat tightened. "Where?" Thanum handed her a photo, a blurry image from a street camera. Maria in disguise, walking into Lumpini Park at dawn. She made sure she was seen, Phantom said. Your syndicate watches that park every morning. She wants them to follow. Vera's pulse quickened. Then we meet her before they do. Phantom shook his head. You don't understand, she didn't say meet. She said come alone. The night passed in slow fragments, planning, waiting, remembering. Marcus insisted on backup. You walk into that park alone and we'll be burying another ghost. She said alone, Vera replied, and Maria doesn't waste words. Elena crossed her arms. You think it's really her? What if it's a trap? Vera looked down at the small origami crane she'd unfolded earlier, the one she'd found on the warehouse wall. Inside, written in tiny pen strokes, tomorrow, dawn, northwest corner. The paper burned to ash in her palm, flash paper. Maria's signature. It's her, Vera said softly, and she's telling me they're listening. Marcus exhaled. Then we'll watch from a distance. You go in, we cover you, that's non-negotiable. Vera didn't argue. She learned long ago that going alone didn't mean being unsupported. Bangkok at dawn was another world. The chaos slept. The air was still, the city holding its breath. Lumpini Park shimmered under a low mist. Joggers traced familiar paths, oblivious to the undercurrent. Vendors brewed tea on pushcarts, and the lake reflected the rising sun like it hadn't seen what was coming. Vera walked slowly, every sense open. Her hand brushed the pistol, hidden beneath her shirt. On a bench near the northwest corner, a woman sat feeding pigeons. Baggy sweatshirt, messy bun, ordinary. Except her posture was perfect, her eyes scanning constantly. Maria. The woman didn't look up. You're late. Vera smiled faintly. You look like hell. You look worse. They sat there, two soldiers pretending to be civilians, crumbs falling between them. You shouldn't have come, Maria murmured. You called me. I called for a miracle, got you instead. Same thing. Maria's laugh was small but real. You still think humor keeps you human. Sometimes it's all that's left. Maria's hand slipped into her bag, retrieving a small encrypted drive. She passed it without looking. Everything I've found. The syndicate isn't just selling weapons. They're building chaos, manufacturing wars, destabilizing economies, assassinating peace before it starts. Vera turned the drive over, and Clayborn. He's one of 5. The other's Lee, Chinese contractor, officially dead 5 years. Katerina Vyulov, Alexei's sister, Swiss banker, controls financing. The last 2 ghosts. No names, no faces, just signatures. Vera stared ahead. You sure about the intel? Maria's jaw tightened. They tried to recruit me, thought I was tired of hiding. They said the ghost program was never ours, that we were their experiment. Vera's stomach sank, meaning. They built us, Maria whispered. Every mission we ran, every target we took out, it served their agenda. They used us to eliminate their competition. The words landed like a hit. For a moment, all Vera could hear was the wind rustling through palm leaves. She had spent years believing she was avenging her sister. But what if the syndicate had orchestrated even that? What do you want me to do? She asked finally. Maria looked at her tired, fierce, alive. End it, but not quietly. Go loud. Blow the whole damn thing open. Going loud means burning everything, Vera said. Maria nodded. Good. Maybe light is the only thing that kills shadows. Vera almost smiled. You always were the poet. Maria's eyes softened. You always were the weapon. They stood. The pigeons scattered. Around them, morning joggers moved like clockwork, unaware of the war beginning again. You've got their attention, Maria said quietly. Now use it. Vera studied her for a long moment. You coming with me? Maria shook her head. Someone has to stay behind to clean the blood. Vera hesitated. You sure? Maria smiled sadly. Go, Ghost 7, before the ghosts of our mistakes catch up. As Vera turned to leave, Maria added, "Oh, one more thing." She tossed her a small folded crane. Inside, in Maria's handwriting, "They already know you're both alive." Then she was gone, blending into the crowd, swallowed by sunlight. Vera opened the note again, fingers trembling despite herself. For the first time in years, she felt something unfamiliar. Fear. Not for herself, but for what was coming. She looked toward the city skyline, where glass towers glittered like blades. Somewhere up there, 5 people were playing God. And she was about to declare war on them. How much truth could the world survive before it tore itself apart? That question looped in Vera's head as the plane hummed through the night sky. The lights of Bangkok faded behind her, swallowed by clouds. Ahead, nothing but black horizon and consequence. She hadn't told Marcus or Elena where she was going next. Didn't tell Harrison either. Some wars demanded silence, not because you feared being stopped, but because you feared being understood. The flash drive Maria had handed her sat on the tray table, small enough to be mistaken for something ordinary. But inside it was everything extraordinary and terrible. Emails, ledgers, names, contracts. Proof that the syndicate didn't just infiltrate governments. They were the governments. They'd written policies, toppled markets, started wars, and sold the weapons to fight them. And all along, she'd thought she was fighting for freedom. The irony was suffocating. She stared at her reflection in the dark window. For a moment, she didn't recognize herself. The woman looking back wasn't the soldier, the avenger, the marine. She was just tired. A soft voice interrupted her thoughts. "Excuse me, miss, would you like some coffee?" Vera blinked. The flight attendant smiled politely, tray extended. She nodded, "Thanks." The woman poured, then hesitated. "You're American, right? Here on business?" Vera paused just long enough for the lie to sound believable. "Something like that." The attendant smiled again and moved on. Vera's hand tightened around the cup. She could feel eyes again, the same weight she'd felt in D.C., in Bangkok, in every city where power had shadows. She was being watched. But she let them watch. Because if they were watching her, they weren't watching Maria. The plane touched down in Geneva under a pale dawn. Snow fell like ashes. The city glittered with old money and neutral silence, a perfect camouflage for corruption. Vera moved through customs with mechanical calm, her false passport holding steady under the scanner. She could have passed for a diplomat or an academic or a ghost pretending to be alive. Outside, a black car waited unmarked, exactly as promised. Marcus was behind the wheel. "You should have told us," he said quietly as she got in. "You would have tried to stop me." He exhaled, "You're not wrong." They drove in silence for a while. The city blurred past, clean streets, expensive suits, people who'd never hear the word war except in documentaries. Finally, Marcus spoke again. "You really think going public fixes this?" "No," Vera said, "but it changes the battlefield." He gave a low whistle. "That's not strategy, that's suicide." "Maybe." Marcus looked at her. "You've got that look again." "What look?" "The one that says you've already made peace with dying." Vera didn't answer. They arrived at an apartment overlooking Lake Geneva. Small, sparse, quiet. Inside, Elena was already working, surrounded by screens, cables, and enough encrypted gear to make the NSA nervous. She looked up. "You brought it." Vera handed her the flash drive. Elena slid it into the terminal and began decrypting. The screen filled with names, transaction codes, account transfers. "Jesus," Elena whispered. "This is global. Defense ministers, CEOs, senators, private intelligence firms. They've been funding both sides of conflicts for decades. And the Ghost program was their prototype," Vera finished. Elena looked at her. "They used you, Vera, used all of you. They built soldiers who could disappear, kill without accountability. You were the perfect weapon. Vera's eyes were distant. And now I'll be the last one. Marcus crossed his arms. So what's the play? Drop it to the press. Leak it. Vera shook her head. Not yet. If we release it all at once, it gets buried. The syndicate controls most media outlets. We need exposure they can't contain, live, undeniable, global. Elena frowned. And where exactly do we get that kind of stage? Vera looked toward the window, at the United Nations headquarters in the distance. Right there. Marcus laughed once, disbelieving. You're kidding. I'm not. Elena stared. You can't just walk into the UN with classified files. Why not? Vera said. They built an entire world order on lies. Maybe it's time someone returned the favor. Marcus paced. You'll be killed before you get within a mile. Then I'll make sure it's live. Her voice was calm, but her heart wasn't. Beneath the control, beneath the mission, there was something else. Fear. Not of dying, but of becoming what she'd spent her life fighting. She'd killed monsters for years. What if, somewhere along the way, she'd turned into one? Elena touched her arm gently. Vera, don't do this alone. Vera met her eyes. I'm not. And she wasn't lying. Because somewhere in the digital dark, ghost operatives still existed, fragments of a program that refused to die. Hours later, a signal pulsed through encrypted channels worldwide. Every surviving ghost operative, from Nairobi to Berlin to Buenos Aires, received the same message. Protocol Dawn, one last mission. No orders, no coordinates, just a call to conscience. In a safe house in South Africa, Ghost 3 powered up his comms. In Madrid, Ghost 5 burned her old ID and loaded a rifle. In New York, Ghost 10, long presumed dead, whispered, "About damn time." They didn't need explanations. They all knew what it meant. The ghosts were waking. In Geneva, the storm gathered quietly. Vera sat alone by the window, watching snowfall blur the skyline. She could feel the weight of the moment pressing down history, balancing on a single, reckless choice. She thought of her sister, Sarah's smile, the sunlight on her face that day in Kandahar, the sound of the explosion that tore it all apart. Vera had spent every day since trying to make sense of it, trying to believe vengeance was justice. But vengeance never ends. It just changes its flag. A faint knock broke the silence. Marcus stepped in. You ready? Vera stood, slipping the small drive into her pocket. No, but it's time anyway. They walked together through empty streets toward the UN building. Security would be heavy, but that didn't matter. They had other ways and tunnels, forgotten routes mapped years ago for operations that never officially happened. Inside, the General Assembly was already in session. World leaders debated funding, policy, peacekeeping, the same words that had covered up decades of quiet wars. Vera moved through service corridors, her heart steady but her mind fractured, flashes of every mission, every death, every face that faded behind her scope. When she reached the broadcast hub, Elena's voice came through the earpiece. Signals ready. Once you plug in, there's no going back. Vera smiled faintly. Story of my life. She entered the control room, pulling off her cap. Two technicians turned, startled. Hey, you can't be. She held up her badge, an old ghost insignia, and they froze, recognizing something they didn't understand but instinctively feared. Step outside, she said quietly. Now. They obeyed. Vera approached the main console, inserted the drive. The screen went black, then white, then filled with scrolling text, data, documents, footage. Every secret, every crime, every dollar soaked in blood. Elena's voice came through, urgent. You're live, the feed spreading to every major network. Outside, on massive monitors across the UN complex, the broadcast began. World leaders turned, confusion giving way to panic as their own names flashed across the screen, tied to illegal arms trades, assassinations, staged coups. Marcus's voice crackled through comms. They're cutting the feed. Let them try. In that moment, Vera wasn't the ghost. She was the mirror forcing them to see themselves. Security forces swarmed toward the control room, boots on concrete, radios barking orders. Vera stared at the screen one last time. For Sarah, she whispered. Then she pulled the transmitter from the console, snapping it in half to stop the trace. Gunfire erupted down the hall. Marcus shouted, "Move." Vera ran. Elena's voice broke through the static. You did it. It's everywhere: BBC, CNN, Al Jazeera, even dark web mirrors. You just made history. No, Vera said, ducking behind cover. I just made enemies. By nightfall, the world was burning. Governments denied, corporations dissolved, people flooded streets demanding truth. And in the chaos, the syndicate vanished deeper, like snakes shedding skin. Marcus patched through one last call. We've got chatter from DC. Clayborn's missing, and Widow, she's moving again. Vera stared out at the lake. The snow had turned to rain. It was never going to end clean, she said softly, but maybe it ends honest. Marcus nodded. So what now? Vera looked at the skyline, fragile, trembling, alive. Now, she said, we see who survives the truth. How long can a ghost stay alive after it breaks the silence? 3 days. That's how long Vera Mitchell had been running. The world she'd exposed was still catching its breath. Politicians denied everything. Banks froze assets. News anchors stumbled over words like treason and shadow governance. And beneath the noise, the syndicate started cleaning up. They weren't sending armies or lawyers. They were sending assassins. It began in Rome, a car bomb meant for Marcus. Missed him by a minute. Then Madrid, Ghost 5 gone silent mid-transmission. Then the encrypted message that reached Vera's burner phone. They know where you are, E. Elena. The only one she still trusted. Or thought she did. Vera was holed up in an abandoned farmhouse outside Lyon. The kind of place where history collected dust and ghosts waited quietly. Rain hammered the windows. A single bulb flickered overhead, swinging gently in the draft. She sat at a table with a map spread out before her, pins marking syndicate locations, movement reports, names of operatives now confirmed dead or missing. The walls felt too close, the silence too sharp. Marcus entered, jacket soaked through. The news just named you, Vera. They're calling you a terrorist. She didn't look up. They always do that when truth scares them. He tossed a folder onto the table. Then this should terrify them. Inside were surveillance photos, black SUVs, diplomatic plates, men in suits carrying unmarked cases. The route led to Zurich. Widow, Marcus said quietly. She's hunting you. Clayborn put her in charge. Vera studied the images. Widow was precise, never left traces, never missed. Her signature was silence. Then I'll end it before she does. Marcus frowned. You mean kill her? Vera looked up slowly. I mean end the chain. She's not after me because of who I am. She's after me because of what I know, so I make it useless. Marcus leaned closer. How? Erase the leverage, burn the rest of the files, take away their currency, fear. He shook his head. That's not you. You don't destroy evidence, you expose it. She hesitated. Exposure doesn't stop them, it just changes the mask. The bulb flickered again. For a heartbeat, the room plunged into darkness. When the light returned, Marcus was staring at her, not angry but afraid. You're talking like them, he said softly. Vera didn't respond, because maybe he was right. By midnight, the farmhouse was surrounded. She felt it before she saw it, the subtle shift in air pressure, the faint crunch of tires on gravel. Years of combat turned instinct into certainty. "Move," she whispered. Marcus grabbed his weapon. "How many?" "Too many." They cut the lights, slipped through the back door into the downpour. The night smelled of soil and gun oil. A flash muzzle flare in the trees, then chaos. Bullets tore through the rain, windows shattered. Vera hit the mud hard, rolling behind a rusted tractor. Marcus fired back, shouting over the storm. "You said they wouldn't find us this fast." "I said they'd try." She saw movement, black-clad figures closing in from the tree line. Silent, efficient. Widow's style. "Marcus," she yelled. But it was too late. A sharp crack split the air, and he dropped, not dead but bleeding, shoulder torn open. Vera crawled to him, dragging him behind cover. "Stay with me." He grimaced. "You should go." "Not an option." He managed a weak smile. "Always the Marine." She pressed a field dressing against the wound. "Always." Then she looked up through the sheets of rain, across the field, and saw her. Standing in the open. Unarmed. Watching. Widow. Tall, blonde still. Her coat clung to her like shadow. The rain hissed around her, but she didn't flinch. Vera rose slowly, gun leveled. "You came far for a ghost." Widow tilted her head. "You're not a ghost anymore, you're noise." Her voice was calm, almost gentle, the kind of tone killers use when they don't hate you, just have a job to finish. "What did they promise you?" Vera asked. "Freedom, same thing they promised you once." Vera's finger tightened on the trigger. "Freedom's a lie they sell to soldiers who don't read the fine print." Widow smiled faintly. "Then you should have read faster." The gunfire stopped. The world shrank to two silhouettes in the storm, mirror images of everything the syndicate had built and broken. For a long moment, neither moved. Then Vera lowered her weapon. "Why me?" Widow's expression didn't change. "Because you still believe in truth, and truth is bad for business." "Then maybe business should burn." Widow sighed softly. "You sound like her." "Who?" "Your sister." The words froze the rain midair. Vera's voice cracked. "What did you just say?" Widow's eyes softened, almost with pity. "They told you she died instantly, didn't they? That the IED was random, but it was. She was targeted." Vera's throat went dry. "How do you know that?" "Because I was there." The air disappeared from her lungs. Widow stepped closer, slow, deliberate. "I was still agency then, hired by Clayborn's contractors to test new armor. Your sister's unit was the control group. They knew it would fail." Vera felt the world tilt. "You killed her." "I didn't plant the bomb," Widow said, "but I didn't stop it either." Rage and grief collided in Vera's chest. "Why tell me now?" Widow's voice trembled, the first crack in her composure. "Because they ordered me to kill you, and I wanted you to know why I wouldn't." Vera blinked. "You're lying." "I'm tired," Widow whispered, "of being their blade, of pretending survival is loyalty." Vera's grip on the gun faltered. "Then help me end it." Widow's gaze met hers. For a heartbeat, two broken soldiers stood on opposite sides of the same truth. Then a sniper round shattered the moment. Widow staggered, blood blooming across her chest. Vera caught her before she fell. "No, stay with me." Widow coughed, eyes fatting. "You were right about business." "Don't talk." "Burn it all," Widow breathed. "Don't become us." Then she went still. Vera held her there, rain washing the blood away, and felt something inside her crack open. Not anger, not victory, just the hollow grief of knowing that even enemies can die human. Marcus stumbled toward her, pale and bleeding. "We have to move." Vera laid Widow down gently, closing her eyes. "She was one of us once." Marcus looked around. "And now they know exactly where we are." A low hum rose in the distance, the unmistakable sound of approaching helicopters. Vera stood, face hardening. Then let's give them something to remember. An hour later, the farmhouse was gone, flames clawing at the night sky, devouring everything the syndicate thought they could control. In the distance, soldiers searched for survivors. They'd find no bodies, only ashes. And somewhere beyond the fire line, a lone figure walked through the fields, coat soaked, eyes hollow but burning. Vera Mitchell had no home now, no country, no command. But she still had a mission. Widow's dying words echoed in her head, "Burn it all, don't become us." She whispered to the wind, "I won't." The storm carried it away. By morning, the world had changed again. The UN feed had been scrubbed from official archives. Governments called the leaks foreign disinformation. But millions had already seen the truth, and once truth is seen, it doesn't vanish. It haunts. And Vera Mitchell was still out there, haunting them back. The syndicate would rebuild. They always did. But ghosts never stop. Why does every ending sound like rain? It fell again that night, somewhere along the French border, tapping against steel and glass like a memory refusing to die. Vera Mitchell sat alone in the back of a freight truck, the world outside flashing by in fragments, headlights, road signs, pieces of lives she'd never live. She should have been dead, she was. And because of that, Clayborn still had to answer. The syndicate had gone silent after the farmhouse fire. No more messages, no more assassins, just an emptiness that felt worse than pursuit. But emptiness never lasts. It's only the pause before consequence. When her phone finally buzzed, the message was one word: Geneva. Marcus had sent it before disappearing. She knew what it meant. Clayborn wasn't hiding anymore. He was making his final play. She pressed her palm against the cracked screen. Then so am I. Geneva again, this time colder, harder, stripped of neutrality. Protesters filled the square outside the UN building, their signs bleeding under the snow. Truth is treason, no more shadows. The world had seen too much to go back, and too little to understand. Vera moved through the crowd wearing a dark coat and a borrowed badge. Beneath her collar, the small transmitter blinked once every 10 seconds, feeding a live signal to a satellite far above. Elena had built it before she vanished, her last gift. If you fall, she'd said, make sure the whole world hears you land. Inside the Palais, an emergency summit was underway. Leaders whispered, cameras rolled, and at the center of it all, Jonathan Clayborn smiled for the world like a man who'd never been caught. He looked older, thinner maybe, but his arrogance hadn't aged a day. When he stepped to the podium, the room went still. Recent events, he began, have threatened the stability of global security. False information has circulated, fabrications by rogue agents seeking revenge. We must restore order. Vera slipped through the side corridor, unseen by security. She knew every angle of this building now, every blind spot. Clayborn's voice echoed through the speakers, smooth and righteous. War is chaos, he said, and chaos needs management. We provide that management. The same words that had been engraved on the flash drive. War is business. Vera stepped into the projection booth above the chamber. From here, she could see them all, presidents, generals, the architects of sanctioned violence. For years she'd fought in deserts and alleys, never realizing the real battlefield was a boardroom. She pulled a small case from her bag, opened it. Inside lay the drive Widow had bled to protect, the last uncorrupted archive. She slid it into the console. The screen on stage flickered. Clayborn's image froze mid-sentence. Then new footage replaced it, surveillance videos, intercepted calls, financial ledgers, signed authorizations. His voice again, this time unfiltered. Collateral damage is good optics. Heroes need villains. Gasps rippled through the chamber. Cameras swung toward him. For the first time, Clayborn hesitated. Vera stepped into the balcony light. Her voice carried through hidden speakers Elena had hardwired into the feed. "You built an empire out of graves," she said. "You sold faith and called it patriotism. You turned soldiers into products, and you called it peace." Clayborn looked up, fury slicing through his composure. Security. But no one moved. Half the guards were watching the broadcast, mouths open. The other half had seen enough wars to know who the real enemy was. Vera walked the rail slowly, gun drawn but lowered. "You told me once that truth doesn't change anything," she said. "Maybe you're right, but it changes you." He sneered. "You think martyrdom fixes the world?" "No," she said quietly, "but it reminds it to feel shame." He reached for the pistol hidden beneath the podium. She saw it before he moved, her own weapon rising instinctively. 2 shots cracked, 1 echo. Clayborn staggered, clutching his shoulder. "You'll vanish for this," he hissed. "I already did." He dropped. The room exploded in motion, guards rushing, delegates shouting, cameras flashing like lightning. Vera stood still amid the chaos, lowering the gun, the transmitter light pulsing steady against her heart. For a moment she thought of Sarah, her laugh, her stubborn hope that people were worth saving. Maybe this was the closest she'd ever get to keeping that promise. Then she turned, letting the guards close in. They never arrested her, not officially. No record, no trial, just disappearance. Some said she was executed. Some said she was exfiltrated by remnants of the ghost program. Others swore she walked out of Geneva and kept walking until the world forgot her name. But stories have their own way of surviving. Months later, in a small coastal town in Portugal, an old fisherman found a woman working at a repair shop near the docks. She spoke little, smiled rarely, and always watched the horizon like it might come alive. One night he asked her name. "Vera," she said after a pause. "It means truth." He nodded, not understanding why that seemed to matter. The world moved on as it always does. Governments fell, new ones rose, and somewhere in the noise, a generation began to ask harder questions. Every now and then, a new leak appeared online, documents, recordings, proof that the syndicate still existed, still hunted profit in every border skirmish and peacekeeping mission. But each leak was signed the same way. G7. The ghosts were still awake. One evening, as the sun bled into the Atlantic, Vera sat on the pier, hands rough from work, scars fading but never gone. A radio played softly nearby, news of trials, resignations, whispers of reform. She didn't smile, not really, but there was something like peace in the way she watched the waves. Marcus's voice echoed from memory. "You sure about this?" Her answer came back across time, quiet, certain. "I'm sure about one thing. Someone has to remember why we fight." She reached into her pocket and unfolded the last paper Crane Maria had given her. Its edges were frayed, ink nearly washed away, but the words were still there. "Light kills shadows." Vera set it afloat on the water. The tide carried it out, small and defiant. She whispered to Sarah, to all of them. "Semper Fi." The wind caught her hair, the gulls rose, and the sea swallowed the last trace of the crane. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts. And somewhere out there, between truth and silence, the ghosts kept watch.